In an industry stuffed with marketing bullshit, empty promises, and Chinese-suited liars, one woman's had enough. She knows what it's like to have the wrong clients, no money, and no time for fun. But she also knows how to fix it. And on the Business for Superheroes show, she promises to tell the down and dirty truth about business, sales, and running away with the circus. Here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
And welcome to the Business for Superheroes show. I'm Vicky Fraser, and this week there is no Joe, and instead there is a Neil O'Brien, and we're going to be talking about something that all business owners really need to pay attention to, and it's coming at a very good time in January because we all need to be a bit more organised. So, Neil, thanks very much for coming on the Business for Superheroes show. Welcome.
Yeah, Vicky, and thank you very much for having me.
Cool. No, you're very welcome. So do you want to tell us a bit about who you are and what you do to start with? And then I've got a bunch of questions for you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm based in Cork in Ireland, a place you're somewhat familiar with from your mastermind, John. So yeah, I grew up here, I went to college, and I studied management accounting, which is, it's not geared for doing taxes, but it's geared for going into companies, doing their accounts and working out their costings and margins and so on. So I spent a few years working in London, spent some time in Florida, and then I came back to Ireland. And I worked as an accountant for 15 years, but I started my own consulting business 15 years ago, specializing in 80/20.
Now, okay. So I've talked about 80/20 a lot, so I'm going to be super disappointed if my listeners don't know what that is. But Neil, tell us what your take on 80/20 is. How do you consult on 80/20? What's that all about?
Yeah, well, it's a naturally occurring law. And I mean, it applies to everything in life. But as business owners, where it's really applicable is to our profits. And I suppose I'll tell you the story how I stumbled on it, Vicky. I was working for an electronics company about 20 years ago. And what I did, about 40 customers. So what I did is I got a big spreadsheet and I put all the sales along the top. And then I put all the supplier costs. And then I took all the other costs like wages and everything else. And I allocated them across the 40 customers. So it was like having a net profit per customer. Yeah. Okay. And then I sorted them from left to right. So the most profitable were on the left-hand side, and the least profitable on the right-hand side. And when I looked at it, what we discovered was pretty extraordinary because they had 40 customers, and yet just 3 of them were giving them 91% of their net profits.
Wow, just 3 out of 40.
Yes. And at the other end of the scale, there was 18 customers who were actually losing the money.
Oh, gosh.
So this is what 80/20 is about. If you do the analysis, and it applies to every business, you will have a smallish number of whales, which are the profitable customers, and you'll have a much bigger number of sardines. And what you want to try and do with that information is you want to change that mix. So you want to put in more whales and less sardines. And what happens is it has a massive impact on your bottom line. Doing this, it can totally transform a business in 6 or 12 months. So you have to know the numbers, and then you take actions to improve that mix. Okay,
so I mean that sounds like such a simple thing to do. So how do you persuade business owners to do it? Because even if they can see the numbers, I would imagine that the idea of firing 18 clients is probably quite alarming to a lot of people. So how do you work with businesses to get them to do it?
You're right. That is difficult. And Vicky, as you know, and your listeners will know, most of them are business owners. We're trained in business to think that every customer is good and every sale is good. Yeah, that's the way we're trained. Now, when you look at the numbers, even if you see a sardine and it's losing money, it can be difficult because there's emotional attachments to them. Like one person said to me, that was my very first customer, I can't fire them. Or I play golf with him every Saturday, you know? Yes. So you have all these emotional things. So it can be difficult. But what I find is that when people see the numbers, it generally gets the message home. So what we do then with the sardines is, what you want to do is generally what you have to do is increase the prices. One example, it was actually one of the stories in my book, was a printer where when I worked out the cost of doing one-off orders, they were charging this woman €70 for her grandson's 21st party invitations, and it should have been €200. Wow. So what we did is we first of all, we just doubled the price from 70 to 140, and then we increased it to 200. So what happened then is when people came back, most people wouldn't pay it. Mm-hmm. People who did, at least you're covering your costs. And it was quite funny because we were sending these people down to his competitor, the printer, you know. And we thought this is great fun. And of course, the competitor probably thought my client was gone mad. But we knew these these people, these sardines, were not making money.
Sure.
So that's kind of what you do with them.
Okay, so, and I guess there's, you don't have to be mean about it either. Like you say, that's one really good way of dealing with them is actually, I can't help you, but I know somebody who can. So, how do you suggest that people get started with this process?
Well, I suppose step one, Vicky, is to work out the numbers. And I appreciate for some people in business, when you talk about numbers, their eyes glaze over, So, either you do it yourself or maybe an accountant or bookkeeper can do it. And I imagine a lot of people in your inner circle and listening to this are probably service providers anyway, Vicky, like you and me, are they? So
yes.
If you take, I'm going to give you, if you think about your own business, Vicky, for a moment, if you wanted to do it, and let's just say you have consulting income, you have your inner circle, you have workshops or whatever. So what you do is you take your income for a period of time. It could be a month or 3 months or a year. And first of all, you do just take off any direct costs. So for example, if you have printing associated with your inner circle, you would take that off your printing income. If you're booking hotels for workshops and so on. So then you're left with kind of your gross income. And then all you do is you work out how much time goes into each one of those. Yeah?
Yeah.
And you could just work out an hourly rate. And what you'll find is that you will have a different hourly rate for every single income stream you have, or maybe sometimes every client you have. And what you can do then is start, well, if you want to, you either increase your prices or you cull. An example now would be a web designer. Let's just say there's a web designer and their charge out rate is €100 per hour.
Yeah.
They're doing a website and they estimate it's going to take 20 hours and they've got a hotel client and they have a restaurant. Now, let's just say if the hotel actually takes 20 hours because they're very organized, then the web designer will make their rate of €100 an hour. Yeah?
Yeah.
But let's just say the restaurant are totally disorganized and they keep making changes and whatever, and the web designer doesn't charge them and it takes 40 hours. Then effectively their rate is halved. Yeah? Sure. So, and if you do that, like what I do every January, I do this exercise every January and I have a cull. I actually work out my hourly rate so I know my whales and sardines. And what I do with the sardines is I just fire them. I could, nicely.
Sure.
I mean, this is where the emotion comes into it. Last January, I fired some people that were actually my longest customers.
That must
but the rate had just got dropped so much that the rate actually stayed the same. It's just I was finding better customers and whales and charging more. So their rate was dropping. Now, in a nice way, I went and fired them. But I mean, it can be, can be a little bit difficult at times. Yeah, it can be. So, yeah.
So what's the biggest difference that you've seen this exercise make to one of your clients? You talked about the kind of the one with the 3 that made 91% of income in 2018, but you must have seen some massive changes with your clients that you've worked with over the years.
Yeah, it's huge. I've seen, there was a recent example with a printer, and what happened was over about a period of about 6 months, we were changing. Once we'd identified the whales and sardines, we started getting rid of the sardines. And he actually realized that colleges and hospitals were whales.
Right.
So actually, one of the things you do with this information it's what you do with the information, I suppose, is where the real value is. And they were doing 2 forms for this local hospital. And when they went and spoke to them, because you want to try and sell more to your existing whales, they realized that every month this hospital printed about 72 forms and they were only doing 2 of them. So they actually got 2 more forms from that hospital. And within about 6 months, what we found is that their sales had gone up 25%, but their profits went up 87%.
Wow.
Because,
okay. Can you explain how that works? Because I think a lot of people get confused with sales and profits. And
it's important that, I suppose, the whales and sardines, when I'm talking about that, I'm not just talking about sales. I am talking about profits.
Okay.
And it's very important to distinguish that. So going back to the example I gave earlier on, Vicky, if you were doing this exercise yourself, what I'd suggest you do is that you take all your various income streams that you would take off. Let's just say there was a hotel cost because you were running a workshop and so on. You take off those costs. What you're left with is your gross profit. And that is what I would use. Look at how much time goes into each one of those and just work out roughly how much do I make per hour for doing my workshops and my inner circle and whatever. So the whales are based on, let's say, for example, if you found out that your consulting income was your most profitable income, I'd call that your whale. And let's just say you ran a workshop, and when you took off the hotel costs and you realized you put all this time into it, that hourly rate was much lower, I would call that a sardine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's based on your profits, not necessarily on your sales. Does that kind of explain it?
It does, yeah. And I think if most people who are listening do that exercise, I think they'll get quite a nasty shock when they realize what their actual hourly rate is.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a very interesting exercise to do if anyone is listening and they think, okay, well, most service providers, I suppose, have a charge out rate, an hourly rate or daily rate. So let's just say your rate is €100, £100 per hour. And then say, well, how many billable hours do I think I should have in a week? So let's just say I'm going to do a quick exercise, £100 per hour. But I should be charging out 25 hours a week. That's 2,500. And let's say excluding holidays or whatever, you might say, I'd like to work 46 weeks. So that's a total of 115,000. Yeah. Now, quite often when you did that exercise, somebody might find, well, actually, I only made 60 grand, only invoiced 60 grand last year. So actually the rate you think that's 100 is actually only 50 for various reasons. So it can be a very sobering exercise to do.
Yes, it can. It's an exercise I did a few years ago, and it was a very sobering exercise.
Yeah. And what changes did you make from that, Vicky?
I just started paying much more attention to what I was actually doing with my time, because I mean, I can't remember what the name of the law is, but it's, tasks expand to fill available time. So found like giving myself tighter deadlines worked really well. Just paying attention to where my time was going, stopping answering the bloody phone is a massive thing. It's one of the first things I did was just stop picking up the phone, stop answering emails, and just segmenting time I found to make a huge difference.
Yeah. And even something as simple as, what I do, Vicky, and just my diary, I just have, at the top of my diary every day, I have KPIs, and I write down how much money I make every day.
Oh, okay.
It's very simple, but you know what? And I found in the past, there's been times where I've actually made 60% of my weekly income in one day because I ran a workshop and I had 2 consulting clients. So that can be it's very simple, but it can really show you, well, how much money did I actually make today? Not what I invoiced, what was the value of the work I did that'll be invoiced at the end of the week or the end of the month. And, I suppose the real value, Vicky, in 80/20 is the analysis is, okay, that's step one, is to work out who are my whales and sardines, who are my most profitable clients and who are my least profitable. But it's only when you start changing that mix that the real value in 80/20 comes out of it. And, if I go back to that example of the web designer, imagine a web designer. Let's say they have 10 clients and they have 2, and let's say their total profits are 100, and they have 2 whales and they have 4 sardines. So the 2 whales will probably be giving them 80 of that 100 profit. Yeah. That makes sense. And the sardines are actually probably losing money, so they're not contributing anything. Now, if the web designer knows this, and let's just say in the next while they take out 1 sardine because they fire them, they fire, say, a restaurant, and they replace them with another hotel, which is a whale. So they're adding in another 40 profit and taking out a minus. Well, what can happen 2 months later is that their profits of 100 can actually go up to 140 or 150.
Right.
Just by taking out 1 sardine and replacing it with 1 whale. And it really can be as easy as that. And what I find about 80/20 is that it's like getting a new pair of glasses. Okay, you will never look at your business the same because you know the ones you want to work with and you know the ones you don't want in terms of profit.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess it takes out the emotion from the whole thing, I guess, doesn't it? It just makes it very, very clear.
Yeah, it can do. Like I'm working with an accountant at the moment, and they have 300 clients, and they identified 109 of them are sardines. Now that's a big chunk.
That's more than a third.
Yeah, but they're all below €500, so they're small. Now the accountant is, a few weeks ago he was totally committed to doing it, and then, a few days later he sent me an email going, "Oh yeah, but it's still 40 grand in fees," and it can be difficult. But he's made that decision. And in the last 2 weeks, we've actually focused on his existing whales, right? And we've identified about 85 grand of extra fees and sales he can get from just 5 of his whales. Okay. So, I know it's a difficult decision, but it's like they say, nature hates a vacuum. You get rid of those sardines, and at the same time, if you're looking at doing more with your whales, you will actually get more work and more profitable work.
Yeah, that's such a good point, actually. So how would you recommend that people go about, because I don't think people think of it like that. It's like, oh, I'm just going to lose all these clients and
Yes.
I'm going to lose these fees. And like you just said, you've identified that extra 85 grand that he can make from his whales. So how can people pull that extra income out of their best clients? What would you recommend that they do?
Go and talk to them. Well, it can be as easy as that, Vicky.
Yeah.
I mean, and a little bit of, and I think maybe the number side, the analysis side can put people off, but it's probably not as difficult as people realize. But I really would encourage people to do it. And like that web designer, let's just say if they know those hotels or whales and the let's say the restaurants or sardines, what they can do is go and talk to their existing hotel clients and see what else they can do with them. Mm-hmm. And also when it comes to their marketing, you can imagine now when they're putting a marketing plan together, they're not going to be going after the sardines or the restaurants, say. They're going to go after the hotels, yeah? And it really can be as easy as that. I mean, with this accountant, we just picked 5 of his whale clients and just analysed their accounts. And between us, we came up with all different ideas how they could reduce their costs and grow their profits. So the accountant is now going to talk to them and say, look, I think I can help you with ABC. And that gives you, like, in one case, it was $500,000 extra profit.
Wow.
Now, if he only charges them 10% of that, it's 50 grand. Yeah. So like in one fell swoop, he's actually replaced all those 109 sardines.
Yeah, and freed up a lot of time as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really would encourage people just to do the analysis, and once you have it, just actually target your existing whales and target your marketing and form more like them, and you'll be automatically filtering out those sardines because you know what they're like and you know what you don't want.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if somebody was, I know we talked a bit about this earlier, but if somebody was, I know that people are going to be thinking, oh, I don't want to look at my numbers because it's scary. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And, I can't talk to my accountant about it, or maybe the first step should be go and talk to your accountant about it. But what's the very first thing that you would suggest somebody does to get started on this?
Okay. Well, you could probably do, a very quick analysis if you just were at the end of this year. So let's just say you look at your sales for this year. And if you don't mind going back to yourself as an example, Vicky, in your case, you might say, well, I have my sales come from different categories. There's my inner circle, there's consulting, there's workshops, whatever. So let's just say you have 5 categories of income. So I'd encourage you to just put them on a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And then the next line would be any direct costs associated with that income. I would put that in and take it away. Okay. Yeah. So if you have hotel costs or workshops, I would take that away. And then you're left with what we call your gross income for each of those different types of categories. Mm-hmm. And then I would try and just estimate, well, how much time do I think that I put into each one?
Okay.
It might be easier. You could even do this for a month. If you had regular repeat income every month, you could just do it for a month, because then it might be easier to work out your hours. And just put your hours under each one of those 5 categories and work out an hourly rate.
Okay.
Yeah?
Simple as that.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Cool.
Well, hopefully I know it's easy for me to say it. But I mean, even if you can do that, great. If you can't, then I'd encourage you to get somebody maybe who's maybe stronger on numbers, like a bookkeeper or accountant or a friend or whatever, and you get a spreadsheet, and you could do an awful lot in half an hour or an hour. You could probably, and you know what, Vicky, what I find sometimes with this is if you just do what I call a quick and dirty analysis and work out an hourly rate, if you did it in half an hour, the result you get could be very similar. And let's say you spent a day doing it or 2 days doing it. Quite often the result doesn't change that much because you can get a reasonably accurate picture quite quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So big takeaway there, guys. Sit down and just do your quick and dirty numbers. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Joe does this for me because I just glaze over. I'm one of those annoying people who glazes over. So
yeah.
Joe makes me do this, and it's very helpful.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, so what are the top 3, or what are the biggest business challenges that you've seen business owners face when you've been consulting with them, kind of relating to this productivity thing?
Productivity.
Well, relating to the 80-20 with numbers and with, because you can apply 80-20 to productivity as well, can't you, in time?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to that was one of your questions, Vicky, earlier, and the email was like, in terms of 80-20 productivity, I know you did a brilliant webinar on this earlier in the year about planning your time and so on. So the number one tip I give people is eat your frog first thing in the morning.
Yes.
Before I used to go to the gym, and then I'd start work, but I've reversed that now in the last while. So I spend 2 hours in the morning eating my frog, and then I go exercise.
Oh.
So my frog is my most important task, and I just have a little I know people on the podcast won't see it, but I just have a little it's like an envelope or something. I just have 5 or 6 frog tasks written down here, and I might do one in the morning. If I have 5, I'll do 2 hours on Monday on A, and so I find that brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So eat your frog first thing in the morning. You said earlier on, I think you have to manage your time. That means phone on divert. It means not checking emails. You have to, if you allow email, it'll just totally distract.
Yeah.
And they're my main tips, really, Vicky, on productivity. And 80-20, that's pure 80-20 as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so where do you see yourself going in the future then? Because you've obviously got a thriving consultancy practice, and do you still do accountancy as well, or is it just consulting?
No. I call myself a recovering accountant.
Recovering accountant.
But it's funny because when I left accountancy 15 years ago, and I thought calculator behind me and so on, but business is all about numbers, and so I use spreadsheets most days and calculators. I suppose, Vicky, the thing I've developed in the last year and a half is mastermind groups. I have 2 mastermind groups I'm running.
Okay, cool.
They're half-day groups. So it's a mini version of what you do with John.
Yeah.
Because I joined one of Christian Simpson's masterminds in the UK last year. And so I kind of learned their format, and I run 2 groups here now, and I absolutely love them. And in terms of what they say, whales, they're not my super whales, because in one morning it's very lucrative. Now I do love them as well, but they've become my super whales.
Sure.
So part of my plan is to roll out more of them next year, and the next step with the consulting is to develop more online courses, and then also do a software product.
Okay, a software product, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, it'll be an 80-20 software product.
Okay. Do you want to tell us more about that, or is that a secret?
No, well, it's just, it'll be taking the templates and whatever. I have all these great templates I use in consulting.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be taking some of those and making a product out of them.
Okay, so just making them available to more people.
Yeah, so like the question you were asking earlier on, what could people do? The idea being that it would take them through the steps they can do to work out their whales and sardines, which is step 1. And then you put a strategy in place about how to change that mix and boost your bottom line by going after more whales and firing sardines. And
I think that's going to be a really cool thing, because I think one of the things that people struggle with most as business owners is that glazing. It's like as soon as somebody says numbers, everybody just glazes over. It's like difficult. It just seems difficult. If you're not an accountant, I'm a writer, and I don't want to do it. So making it into something, almost making it into like a game. It's like you can find the things that the things that are going to make you the most money. And it's like, well, actually, when you put it like that, it suddenly sounds more attractive.
Yeah, a game like find your that could be the game, Vicky. Find your sardines. Find your So I know.
Whack-a-mole, whack a sardine in the nicest possible way.
Yes, it's fun, and. I suppose you just back very briefly to the question you asked me earlier on about there is this fear thing about firing sardines. So what I often do with people is, at the same time we're firing sardines, I have them going after more whales and selling more to the whales. And I think that makes it easier. With this accountant, that's kind of what we're doing. At the same time, he's firing the sardines, we're talking to his whales and identifying more income. And I think that makes it easier to fire the sardines when he's going to get 85 grand at least from these other 5 whales. He's only going to lose 40 from the sardines. So it makes it much easier.
Yeah, I think when you can put it like that and get people to see it in a more visual way, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot more palatable, I think. Yes,
it's true, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Neil, thank you so much. I love talking to you. It's the first time we've had a proper chat, and it's been fantastic. Yeah. Where can people find out more about you? Because you've written a book, which you very kindly sent to me, and it's a great book. And where can people get that for a start?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah, 101 business lessons from a recovering accountant, and that's got about 15 or 20 case studies on 80/20, as well as other stuff. And yeah, my email is probably the easiest, Vicky. Neil, Neil at Quantum QUANTUM.IE. And actually, I must thank you for helping me with my book, because when you published your book was about a year before mine, I think, and you definitely inspired me a bit, because you were kind of saying, if you can do it, anyone can. Yeah. So I must give you credit for that, Vicky. You certainly helped me get my book out there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. No, yeah. I just love seeing people write their books, because anyone and everyone with a business can and should do it. And it's so not as difficult as you think. It's not as difficult as you think, is it?
No, it's not. No. It only took me 3 months and 9 years. No, I won't say that. No.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's 3 months and 9 years, because people spend 9 years thinking, I really want to do this. And then just not doing it.
Yeah. So no, it's great to get it out there. It's worked really well for me.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that. Okay, so I'll put the link to your book and to your email in the show notes, and then people can go find your book, and they can drop you an email if they want to know more about 80/20.
Yeah, and Vicky, like when I have spare capacity, I'm happy to do. I'll do a 30-minute call with people. I know you do something like that, and I'm happy to do it, because in 30 minutes I can probably find out enough to say, look, what they need to do next, or maybe they can just go and do it themselves. If they want to do something with me, we can talk about it. So you can get through quite a lot in 30 minutes. So I'm quite happy to get on the phone with anybody who's interested in just having a chat about it.
That is a very generous offer. Thank you, Neil. Guys, if you are listening and you think that you are terrified of your numbers and you don't know where to start, drop Neil an email, neil@quantum.ie, and get on a call with him, because that's a really generous offer. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Vicky. And it was great chatting to you. And I'm happy to come on any other time if you want to talk about 80/20 or selling prices, the other big one I do. So, I'm happy to come on again. And thank you very much for having me. And hope you have a lovely Christmas, and all your listeners, and whatever celebrations they have, or happy holidays, or whatever they say in different parts of the world.
Yeah, festive festivities.
Is that it?
Okay. I don't know.
That's okay. Okay, Vicky.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Guys, Joe will be back next week, so you'll have the pleasure of his dulcet tones. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this podcast, please go and leave us a rating and a review, 5 stars on iTunes. Share it with your friends, family, colleagues. www.vickyfraser.com/podcast, and check out the show notes for Neil's links. And we'll be back same time next week. Bye.
Like what you've just heard? Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, send them to www.businessforsuperheroes.com/podcast.